Welcome, everybody. My name's Max Ball, and this is another episode of the Heart of CX podcast. Joanna Palmer's here with me today. How are you doing, Joanna?
I'm doing well. How are you, Max?
I'm doing really well, and I am excited because you have done something unprecedented in the long storied history of the Heart of CX podcast. You have brought us our first guest.
Yes, yet another first here at the Heart of CX.
Yeah,
I'm really
just
excited to introduce Ben Varela. He joins us today as our first guest on the Heart of CX. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself and give a little bit of background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Ben Varela. I started in the contact industry probably around 2004, June 2004, if you want to be a little exact. Um,
about.
I actually started working with the very first company that developed workforce management from the ground up. So there was a small company in Tennessee called TCS. I forget exactly
Yes.
the date. Sometime in the 80s, that a couple of Vandy grads developed the TCS as the first workforce management solution, I think, with American Express. So that's actually the
Hmm.
company I started on with. That's where my heritage is from. And ever since then, I've kind of been around the industry a bit. Now I'm with Ring Central. I've spent some time in IT consulting. I've actually worked at Google for a while. So I've kind of been all around the place.
Very, very cool. Well, welcome. I'm so glad to have you this week on the Heart of CX. So, you mentioned that you grew up in the workforce management space. So, tell us a little bit about workforce management, what your definition is, what those major pillars or areas of focus are within workforce management.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anybody watching this, you'll probably see my bias coming out. I definitely break down workforce management in a very particular way. So starting from the ground up, it's you start with forecasting, scheduling, what some people might call tracking. That's where you're comparing the plan that you've made, the forecast and the schedule, against what's actually happening today. Then there's kind of a new kind of realm where you're coming into time off management. So scheduled trades, vacation, PTO, that sort of thing. So how do you manage all of that? And then agent engagement. That's kind of a really new area where we're trying to increase agent retention, decrease attrition. We don't want any of those really high, triple digit attrition rates annually. We're trying to reduce that cost. And kind of the one thing that wraps it all together is reporting and analytics. So forecasting, how do I plan for what work's coming? Scheduling, how do I put the right people into that plan? How do I react to that plan with tracking? How do I manage time off? How do I engage my agents, giving them all the options to work within the system as possible, and then reporting to bring that all around to make sure that we are doing the things that we should be doing.
Awesome. Awesome. So, with that, I want to start with agent experience first. One of the things that Max and I have talked about before is the employee experience and how closely that ties to customer experience. And so, as we think about um, the agents in the contact center, how does workforce management boost employee experience?
That's a great question. Oftentimes, one of the leading factors for agents who are leaving a contact center give for leaving is around just bad schedules, right? We've all dealt with that from a workforce management perspective. And it's really hard to manage, especially as the number of agents increase, even with the best tool sets out there. And I've worked with all of the best ones, and they all have their positives and negatives. What we have found is flexibility dosed out in the right way can be a huge impact to overall agent experience. So one, how do we give agents access to see what their days look like? What does this week look like? What does next week look like? What can I expect? Expectations are often the make or break. Can, as an agent, I expect what my schedule will be next week or the week after, so on and so forth. Also, flexibility. If all of a sudden, as a parent, I forgot I need to take Susie off to swim practice on Friday. I forgot to put that in my schedule. That doesn't make it any less of a need for me as an agent. So how can we give tools out to the agents to allow them to manage that in a very automated fashion? So do they have to go down and track down Bobby over there to trade schedules with? Do I have to see, do I have enough PTO? Am I going to get in trouble for taking that day off? What happens if we could start merging what are the requirements for the contact center? Maybe as a contact center, I don't even really need you that much on Friday, right? If I were to look at what's my projected service level, maybe I'm going to hit 80%, 90% service level with or without you. But next Tuesday, I'm in dire straits. Maybe my projection is that I'm going to have 40, 60% service level. What if the system were smart enough to say, hey, Susie, fine, take Friday off, but we really need you on Tuesday. How about we swap those 3 hours? Imagine being able to do that without a supervisor having to do 4 or 5 hours worth of homework, because those supervisors get burnt out trying to do that. And there's a lot of ROI left on the table for these companies that could be getting a lot of potential out of it.
Well, that's
Yeah,
interesting because I think of workforce management primarily as a financial thing for the company where optimizing a schedule is bringing in a lot of money. But it sounds like above and beyond that, if you're doing it right, it's also a huge benefit for the agents as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Optimization of schedules, that's one of the best ways to actually extract ROI beyond just agent productivity from a workforce management tool. However, I think what we've noticed is it's really easy to over optimize agents, right? So is the over optimization of our schedules causing increased attrition? Could we do this optimization of schedules and then extend flexibility based on what the tracking or intraday planning is going to be over the next week or so to increase that agent experience, right? So I see it as a tightrope walk that is difficult for us normal mortals to figure out on our own without a tool set to go with us.
so since us normal mortals can't figure this out on our own, what are some of those trends and technologies you're seeing that are enhancing forecasting and scheduling?
So, from a forecasting perspective, yeah, everybody throws out the term AI or artificial intelligence or machine learning, and it's almost passe by this point. But in every large workforce management shop that I've been in, and I've been in anything from a 60,000 agent contact center all the way down to 60 agents. Um,
Wow.
Wow.
Most of those contact centers do a large portion of their forecasting in Excel. Uh,
Hmm.
you can't rip Excel out of their hands for anything. So I think there is a huge amount of control required by the workforce management planners in order to do their job. However, just like we were talking about with the agent experience and the scheduling, and just there's so many confounding variables going on. What if you had a tool that understood? Here's my routing plan on my contact center system. Here's the skills I have for these agents. Here's the historical trends that I've seen. Uh, Maybe it's doing Monte Carlo simulations and linear regressions and over all sorts of different time periods, and it's factoring in all those Erlang things. What happens if it's outbound calling, which isn't Erlang? What happens if it's multi-chat or
Mhm.
omni-channel where you're handling multiple concurrent sessions at a time? There's so many different algorithms and such that you have to bring in there that while I'm going to be doing work in Excel because that's what I trust, it'd be great if there was a system that would just run it through all these different calculations and say this is what our expectations are based on these English worded variables, right? Maybe COVID hits and all of our projections go out the window and the system says based on the last 3 weeks this is a trend that we have never seen before. Our expectation is that your next 3 weeks are going to look like this. And then as a workforce manager I could say, well, this is my historical forecast, this is what I'm getting in Excel, but the system's telling me based on this thing I've never seen before that this is what I can expect. Now I can view those and I can say, I can have multiple plans that I can start planning for. I need to put in a contingency for voluntary time off, or I need to start rallying the troops. Maybe I need to start hiring people because in 6 weeks we're not going to be able to keep up with this. It's going to give you options beyond what you currently have. And it's going to help you become comfortable potentially moving your forecasting from your Excel worksheets or your existing seasonality in your current workforce management tool to something that would be a more guided experience with a ML machine learning sort of tool.
That's great insight, for
Uh,
sure.
I have spreadsheet shivers just hearing you talk about it. To try to take a spreadsheet to that level horrifies me.
Yes.
I've seen pivot tables that I couldn't decode from some workforce management planners before. I don't know where they get some of these people, but the formulas and such in there, I don't
Just
think I'd be able to
insane.
put them together.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy, crazy. So we've seen quite a bit recently about the gig economy. You know, Uber has the gig economy. Do you ever see that coming to the contact center space, a true gig contact center?
Yeah, I don't want to name any names, but yes, absolutely. I've seen this a lot. Particularly, I've seen this with highly paid contracted professionals. And a lot of times what we want to do is say, okay, here's a matrix of an entire week, split up by maybe 15 or 30-minute intervals. And within that week, each one of those intervals might have a requirement in order to hit the projected service level that we've come up with off of our forecasts and so on and so forth. We want to be able to plug those agents in at their behest, preferably give that over to the agents and that agent engagement, agent experience that we were talking about before, give that to them so that they can just sign up whatever those 30-minute intervals that you want and be able to attack that. There's a ton of interest in that. And I see a lot of the contact center industry moving that way. However, I think we also need to be really careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater as well, because while there is a need for that gig economy, especially with those specific contracted professionals, uh, there is a lot of use, like we discussed previously, about having those highly optimized schedules. Those schedules really do save companies a ton of money. So can we
Mm.
take this gig economy approach and expand it beyond potentially just the gig economy and layer that or augment it against our existing scheduling and intraday planning practices? I see that as a hugely powerful tool. And like what we were saying with Susie potentially taking off, say, a Friday for a swim lesson with her kiddo and picking up a Tuesday or Wednesday because that's what the service level requirements. What if that were all built into a similar interface and it was only one thing for agents to learn? What if we could extend this gig economy beyond just gig economy to overall agent and human flexibility, right? Because we all have things that we need to do and get done within the day. If we can extend and offer flexibility, which I believe we're having a hard time doing because it's so much work for the workforce management professionals to actually build that into their plans
The
and having
spreadsheet's
tools
bad
like that to do
enough.
it. I've seen it was somewhere between an 8 and 1,200 seat contact center building all of their schedules in Excel. And I remember asking them, how long does it take you to build out those schedules? And it took them 6 weeks. How often do
Wow.
you do this?
Oh
Every
my
6 months.
gosh.
So can you imagine dedicating a
Oh,
team of 3 to 6 people for 6 weeks to build out schedules every 6 months?
it's basically a quarter of their time. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Sounds so
Oh my
painful.
God.
And to build them that far in advance, especially for those that want that flexibility, you know, it does feel painful and antiquated.
And they had the best of the best tools
And
already.
they just didn't want to do it. They just
it,
were.
it it just didn't do one thing that they needed. So I think overall we need systems that are more flexible. And I see this gig economy sort of flexibility coming in and being able to afford that on top of those optimized schedules that we could definitely offer.
You know, one of the things that strikes me as we're talking here, I I have some stock for my company, and there's an investment company that runs it. And of course, I'm too busy during the week to ever worry about it. So somewhere on Sunday afternoon, I'm like, oh, I need to do XYZ. And that's what I end up calling. And it's amazing to me how often I'm not getting some random person. I'm actually getting someone who is maybe not a full broker, but pretty darn close. And in some cases, actually a full broker. So it's interesting how the role of the agent is changing, and you really are getting more of these high skilled. What do you think that's going to do in terms of putting demands on how we do schedules?
So I think you bring up a really big topic there, Max. And where my mind goes with that is not only on the workforce management side, I also work on the contact center routing piece. A lot of times you'll hear in the contact center routing piece where we want to start doing the match.com of routing where
Right.
we have a caller
Yep.
coming in and we have profile information on them, whether that's been derived from social media or some other place, and we have profile information on our agents, and we want to match the right agent with the right caller or contact or interaction at that time. So imagine being able to extend that beyond just the routing, because in some cases, okay, that's revolutionary with routing, but routing's pretty easy because we have all the information right there. We know who the caller is. We know who the agents are that are available. We can do that math and match those up. But what if we could take that information and start forecasting that, right? And figure out,
Hmm.
you know what? We need this personality profile of a Max
Oh
Ball
my
to be able to
gosh.
answer these sorts of questions on these days and these hours, because that's when these personality types tend to
Right.
call in.
All the procrastinators are going to call us on Friday afternoon. So we need the guy who's good with a procrastinator.
Yeah, the procrastinators who have stock and want to know should they pull out or leave it
Yeah.
in, you know?
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thinking about just how hyper personalized it can get for both the agent and the customer calling in. There is so much to think about there. And then you think about all the various different channels as well, and how, with channel proliferation, how does that impact your forecasting and
Oh boy.
scheduling?
Yeah, I was with a company who did a lot of research on that, and the shocking figure that I always like to throw out is back in about, I think it was 2010 was when chat was really starting to take off,
Mhm.
and we always ask how do you figure out what the optimal amount of concurrent sessions an agent can handle before they start breaking down and losing
Right.
efficiency.
8, 12.
And in 2017, I was actually privy to a study that was done where we actually derived what in certain circumstances, there's always edge cases, but in certain circumstances, what is that right number? So I'll just throw it out to you two. What do you think, based on this study, was the appropriate number of concurrent sessions for an agent to handle?
I believe it's between 2 and 3.
I was going to say 2.5. So,
It was 1.4. You guys are way closer than anybody I've asked. So yeah, 1.4 sessions. And what
wow.
that means is most of the time your agent should probably be handling conversations in a single threaded way. But when things are getting out of control, they can move out and handle a second, maybe even a third conversation. But that breaking point happens pretty quickly at those simultaneous conversations. To schedule those sorts of activities for that 1.4, hugely important. But also there's bookend issues with that. So imagine I have an agent who's taking voice calls, inbound voice calls, but they can also handle web chats, and they might have a queue of 5 emails that when they have some downtime, they're reading and typing out
Mm,
on. What happens when they want to take a break? How do you start ramping them down
mm,
off of those
Mhm.
interactions that are coming in so that they can actually take that break? Those are real problems that contact centers are dealing with right now that I haven't seen anyone be able to solve yet. And that's a huge innovation that I would like to see come out, because it's a huge issue for supervisors to be able to manage that on a day-to-day basis when there's a lot of benefit that can come out of supervisors doing what I see as their real job, which is helping coach agents to become better agents,
right.
making them
Right.
more efficient, increasing things like first call resolution, that sort of stuff. Those super important things tend, in my opinion, to fall by the wayside. That's their tertiary responsibility, even though that can potentially bring the highest benefit to the business.
Hmm.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So this is all so very interesting. Thinking about 5, 10 years from now, thinking about workforce management of the future. Let's talk a little art of the possible here. If you could go ideal, Ben, from the various different pillars that we've talked about today, forecasting, scheduling, agent experience. What would you say would be the ideal workforce management of the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So, from a forecasting perspective, it's really coming to a pinnacle of those ideas around AI and ML.
Mhm.
Getting the planners out of Excel and allowing them to trust a system because it is regularly meeting their needs better than they could ever do it themselves.
Do you think that'll happen?
In the short term, it's going to be rocky. In the long term, yeah, I think we can absolutely get there. So some of the things that we've seen recently with AI and ML outside of the contact center space has some really positive implications. So I think we're going to get there. Along with that, scheduling, huge burden for workforce management professionals as well. Being able to automate that in a way that will give agents an expectation for what they're able to work without the 6 weeks worth of drudgery every 6 months. And I'll tell you what, agents want their schedules updated more than every 6 months. So imagine being able to update them more frequently, better,
Mhm.
with a whole lot less labor and effort. So potentially automating that whole flow with forecasting and scheduling, reacting to what's happening from that plan to what's happening today, that tracking piece. You're probably always going to need some eyes on glass at that point, just to keep an eye on it. Maybe I'm thinking too narrowly, but being able to react to those situations potentially with one-click efforts. Imagine we need to offer VTO, but we have 5 different unions in our contact center, and we have these different work rules that are set up, and I need to offer time off to this group of seniority first, and that group of seniority over here, and this geography and that geography. Imagine if that were all built in and you could just click a button and say, we need VTO for 40%. And it just blasts that out to all the agents as
Wow.
appropriately as possible. They get SMSs or in-app messages on their mobile phones, the consent with, okay, can we contact these people while they're not working or while they are working? All of that's already taken care of. We've packaged that into a solution for you. Imagine that the agents can click on that text message and it brings up a grid of, yes, I want these 30 minutes off across these periods of time, and it's not letting too many people off. It's leveling your service level, so you're getting the right people on or the right people off, and it's affecting your ROI in a very positive sort of way.
Wow.
I just imagine an automation for that contact center, uh, allowing all this workforce management planning piece to be so much more efficient and effective at the same time, and then giving agents access in to really be flexible with their schedules in a way that allows them to work around their lives, but also meets the needs of the business.
Well, and I guess if they're working at home, the slices can just get smaller and smaller and smaller because it's like, well, I need to run to the store, or I want to have, I need an hour study break with one of my kids. They just, I can see it just getting ever more granular since you don't have to factor in, oh, I have to drive in now and then I have to drive out and everything.
Or,
Yeah, and
or, or, or imagine it snows 72 inches in Denver, and oh, my vacation to Costa Rica or whatever is canceled. I
Mm,
can pick up a handful more shifts, and it's 30 minutes beforehand. So exactly what you're saying, Max. I can do it in smaller time slices, but I can also react in smaller time slices as well. How
yeah,
often have you
even
heard
better.
you've got to put in your PTO 2 weeks or 48 hours ahead of time? Why? When we have all the technology, it'd be great to take down all of those barriers.
That sounds great.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I love the agility that's possible with
Yes.
this. It is near real time rather than trying to turn around the cruise ship. It's that agile, really quick. We need people now. Let's get them. Or hey, really quick. I need to take this time off. Let me just put it in. So love that idea. So I think we're coming up on time now. This has been such an interesting conversation. I'm going to turn to you first, Max, on final thoughts.
I I just love the art of the possible. The way this can end up being so much easier, and I just have a whole new fear of spreadsheets. I think is the other piece of this.
Yeah, yeah, and a couple of thoughts from me on this. Number one, it's It's the fear of change. And so moving from spreadsheets to workflow automation and letting the machines do it for you, there is that fear of change. And so as you're thinking about what am I afraid of? What's the worst thing that can happen? I think you need to think through that. I mean, I've been there as well in terms of taking that control out of my hands and putting it into a machine. It's scary at times, but it's necessary as well. And the trade-off in terms of benefits versus risk are definitely there. I think the other thing that really a light bulb went off, Ben, when we were talking about agent attributes and matching those agent attributes with the customer attributes. Just like we need CRM for customers, we need that human capital platform for agents so that we've got those attributes so that we can automate the workflows effectively. So then turning it over to you for your final thoughts as well to close us out today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to piggyback off of what you just said, Joanna, and I'm going to start with some thoughts that I had originally. Was one, I don't think workforce management in general should be scary. There is automation coming, but to piggyback on what Joanna was saying is, I don't think there's any need to worry about the future, because as opposed to being in a spreadsheet all day long, imagine if you could positively affect the business on a day-to-day basis. Imagine if your supervisors could positively coach agents to provide a better customer experience, to do things that are more efficient in their agent experience, that makes their quality of life better. Imagine instead of being just a workforce management planner that does forecasting, you're actually helping the business decide what's the best path for customer experience. How do we improve this business unit as part of the company that I'm a part of, and increase the overall bottom line ROI of that company? I really think getting out of some of that drudgery is just going to elevate those positions to a higher power of being able to direct the business.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for the conversation today. Definitely learned some things. Very interesting and exciting to see the evolution of workforce management in the years to come. And thanks everybody for joining today. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Joanna. Thanks, Max.
Thanks, guys. Bye, everybody.